On the agenda, item number 21, consider report from the chair of the Financial Advisory Committee regarding cash procedures. I gave the floor to Commissioner Tom Hooton, and he has given the floor to Mike Sanders.
All righty. Thank y'all. I'd like you to forgive all the accounting mumbo-jumbo about cash. It is important. Our definitions are important, and sometimes we are real precise, and it makes things confusing. So we've had some of those discussions. I haven't talked to Steve since that June 20th meeting, I don't think, so he hasn't had the benefit. Our committee had somebody assigned to cash because we wanted to get those questions answered in update number 1. And then, since then, I reassigned Joe to cash, plus I took a stab at cash. Because this was important, we must know where we stand. I recognize 3 of these 4 numbers on this part. Number 1, 2286-833 is the book balance of the operating bank account. And so this is the bank reconciliation like the one that Robert was talking about. Here is the number at the very bottom, 2286. That is the book balance of what's in the account. Now the bank says there's 2.48 million, so there's some outstanding checks and outstanding deposits. And the bank balance is way back here with 2481466. So this is the bank reconciliation for September 30th, 2013 that the treasurer did. And so how much cash do we have in the bank? Well, a true answer is 2,286,333. So I know what that number is. I don't know what the second number is, although I see what they did, and we can talk about that later, perhaps. The third number, the negative 3.4 million, is the amount of cash in the computer system showing to be the operating balance. And I misplaced mine over here, so I'm going to use Steve's. Ignoring that part. And let's see if I can zoom in a bit. $3.4. That's really not working very well. That's better. 3.4 million. And zero. Zero is the amount in the audit. So all of, and there it is right there. So we are aware of what 3 of those 4 numbers are. When we met with Steve and Judge Lacey in the office, we went through some theorems as to what was going on. And what I told Steve we were probably going to find is that the 0 is a net number. It's not 0 meaning none, but it's 2 numbers that combine together to make 0. So that could be 1,000 and negative 1,000. It could be a million and a negative 1 million. But for some reason, they're different. In the audit report, they don't seem to be different. They just put down the 0. So once we went to the audit work papers, which we did in update 1, we found all of these different accounts. And then these accounts are primarily the same that are summarized in the auditor cash account. Right there. Now, what is going on? Because the numbers do seem to jump around depending on what you ask about. So anyway, we did a lot of work. Talked to Mike Carter about this Friday. I think there was this quote from Bill Court, because the restricted cash, was or carried forward, taken from restricted accounts and then put back in restricted accounts. We did not find any of that to happen. Most of the money seems to be in the operating account. Now, Steve said there was 67 funds. I didn't count them. I have put together what I consider the most accurate cash account for the work on 2013. That totals these things up and adds to the $2.286 million, which is the amount in the operating bank account. And in that bank account, there is general funds designated, some restricted funds, some agency funds, which do not even belong to the county, and a big negative in the general fund, $2.9 million. Now, this does not include the CD. This does not include some of the other little bank accounts that belong in the general fund. And it does not include audit adjustments which had not been made to the book. So this agrees with the audit report. When you look at how much cash, was $39,194,000, is the same number Steve showed you on one of his slides. And that is made up of a negative $1.68 million, a positive $1.68 million, the restricted funds, and the capital INS funds. So how do we get to these numbers? Well, we went to we started out over here, using the auditor's work paper that we put into a spreadsheet. I know you can't read these numbers, but everything here we added up and put in the right column until it balanced. And so in the general fund, I'm so sorry that we can't really see this. In the general fund, this whole column adds up to zero. This column adds up to the $1,066,000, which is the restricted funds. This one's the $32 million, which is the road money, the DCAP highway. And then the $5.3 million, which is money that does not even belong to the county, that we are holding it for others. Well, then we had to go through and categorize these properly. Actually, that looks pretty good. In the operating bank account, there was $2.283 million. It's the same money we have been talking about all night. It was on Steve's list, it was on the auditor's list, it's on my list, it's what the bank reconciliation says. And that amount is made up of all of these. Or actually, it's made up of these three. And then the restricted funds are in that bank account. The 130 is an audit adjustment, 22,000 of INS money's in, and 2.4 million of the agency funds is in this account. If you add the agency funds, are also, Ms. Fox has them in a bunch of other accounts too. You add them all the ones in other accounts. Here's the $5.3 million. $2 million's in the operating bank account. $2.6 million is in a bunch of other accounts. The $33 million is in other accounts. The CD is not classified as operating. Steve mentioned that in one of his things. It was just an inch away. Why was that not in the negative $3.4 million? And the reason for that was a report of what was available from operations. The CD couldn't be cashed in because it had a time restriction. Now, it was cashed in 2 weeks later when the time restriction up, but again, the computer categorized those differently. Now, this is kind of hard. I mean, these are a bunch of numbers, and y'all don't like numbers. So I tried to draw a picture. In the operating bank account, that has a balance of $2,286,332, the number we've been talking about. It contains $1,688,000 of general fund designated funds. That's what we're calling them right now. I got a list of them that are not quite restricted, doesn't look like. They're not quite ready for operations. They're just there. And for some reason, the auditors, the external auditor, never broke them down. We have restricted funds, which are really restricted. We have the agency funds, which belong to other people. You add all these up, and there is $5.199 million of funds that kind of belong to other people. Now, there's this $2.9 million overdraft, which is the same as the $3.4 million overdraft, except for the audit adjustment. So that really, and I know exactly why that happens. So it's complicated, but it's reconciled. And so when you subtract all this together, it's $2,286,332, the amount in the bank. It's hard to think about these graphs when you have negative numbers, so I tried a different approach. Here's a cylinder with a bank account, and it's got $2.427 million of agency funds that belong to other people, and it's got $1,082,000 of restricted funds, and $1,688,000 of general funds that are designated and not available for other uses, and I have a list of them. This is kind of how the bank account should have looked if you had zero money in the general fund, for sure. Here's how the bank account actually looked at year end. Instead of having $5.1 million in it, it had $2,286,000 in it, that bank account balance that we have been talking about. So what happened to this? Now there's also $1 million CD over here and a little bit of other money, but what happened here? And what has happened is that money was spent. The Commissioner's Court approved payables. The treasurer wrote checks out of the normal big bank account, and those checks were cashed. Okay, so here is how we are. I'm going to try to use another example. That's how I really got water. Here's the bank account in about February or March. Everything above the green line is absolutely general fund, undesignated, available to be spent any way that the commissioners want to spend or for the budget. Stuff in the green, which is that much, is the general fund money. That's general fund, but it's really not available to spend. Some of it belongs to the DA, some of it belongs to the county clerk or archives. There's a list of about 20 different folks that this is there. And this is the restricted money and the agency money. And for years, the bank account was always full, had millions of dollars in it. And over the past few years, because of losses, because of the overspending, because of the lack of revenue coming in, because of paying off some loans, the cash is going down and down and down and down. But anyway, this is after all the tax money's come in from December, January, the tax money in. There's plenty of money. And so what happens is, the budget spends it. Okay. There's still some general fund money in. Okay. Then we get, sales tax collections and some other money, and then we pay payroll in March or April. I gotta go to the bathroom. Sorry. And we're still okay. A little more money comes in. Now, this is the same thing that happened this is basically last summer. Okay. And then in about June, there we go. And the treasurer, we need a CD. We're cashing in a CD. I've never cashed in a CD in June before. It's always been August or September or October. We're running out of money. We have 5 CDs. We cashed in a CD in June and spent some money. We cashed in a CD, I'm going to pretend this time, in July, and in August, and in September.
I just want you to know when you reach that 15-minute point, you wrap up as soon as you can. He told me he thought this would take about 15 minutes. I don't even know when he had 15 minutes.
I was wrong. Thank you. Okay. So, anyway. Money on debt. Now, there's cash in the bank. I mean, there's $2 or $3 million of cash in the bank, but it belongs to the agency funds and the restricted funds and the designated funds and the general fund. And when it's all in here, I mean, whose cash is what? Okay, so at the end of the year, it was right about here where the positive 1.68 million of designated funds had been kind of absorbed by the overdraft in the cash account of the general fund. So it should have been up here, instead it's down here, and those two things net to zero. That's why there is zero cash in the general fund. So who doesn't have their money? Would be a question, okay? Tina, I think you have how much? $400,000 in the archive fund?
Well, I've spent some, so
Okay.
it's
That was
more
last
than
year.
that.
Okay. Anyway, this is $2.2 million. And so if you needed your money, here it is. Okay, but you didn't need it, so it's still here. Okay. The district attorney had $400,000 in here. I think the biggest was Mr. Pappas with $1,588,000 or something like that in here. If he needed his money, it was here. Because all the bills got paid that were sent over for payment from this court, you know, it went down low, possibly even lower than it should have. I don't know if that's, I don't think that's illegal. I don't think it's the best way it could have been handled for sure. And so one question was, were people raising their hands saying we're running out of money last year? And I think the answer to that is yes. Now what happened since here? Well, a couple of things happened. We got into the new year and money started coming in. And kind of build it back up. And that's kind of where we have been until lately, where it's gone back down again. But what the fact remains is that 2 years ago, the thing was in an overdraft situation in 2012. It continued overspending. It was in an overdraft situation in 2013. Right now, there's still some cash in there, but it's going down. Actually, right now, it's down again. And $5 million is necessary to bring it up. You know, this is probably not the best way for this to handle, but it never has happened before because the county always had plenty of cash. Now, one transaction that was done now, at year end, it was exactly 2.28 million. And once it filled back up, the treasurer said, whoa, I got a little close to this other money. I think we ought to be more careful, and so, with 2.286, she moved most, but not all of it, to a separate account that was set up. That was $2.2 million, I believe. So that was all restricted and agency money, I believe. Maybe been some designated money that was transferred out of here. Now, it was all the money that was, it was less than the money that was there a year in. It was her money to move over. She didn't move all the money. She didn't go in any more overdraft. She didn't take the general fund balance that I could tell below zero. So that money's been moved over. And now, it has kind of filled up again. Now, all these cash things that the auditor has done different. Right now, I think he says there's, what did he say, $900,000 in the cash thing. That's what's on y'all's sheet for the $2 million transfer. And so, there's $6 million in the account. But their computer keeps track, and it says there's only $900,000 left in the budget of the general fund undesignated money. So that's what's available to pay the county's bills. The money inside the green is available to pay the designated general fund bills, such as your archive money, and maybe your money too. I have to look back. And then the agency funds and the restricted money. Now, I know Judge Lacey has asserted, and again, I don't know the way this works, is that on October 1st, it's a new year, and any money that comes in has to stay in this year. And I don't know how that works because I can't pour in money with it over my hand. Every deposit for the county always goes into this bank account, primarily. And most of the checks get written out of it. And now the account has filled back up. And this account now, like I said, has $6 million in it, their balance, which $900,000 belongs to the county. They got $2.5 million worth of bills or whatever, so they are bringing in $2 million from the $5 million payday loan, and are leaving an account for $400,000. So that's about how the account looks right now, with $400,000 of general fund money in it, and all the rest belongs to folks. So who does the 1.688 belong to? Primarily Jerry Rochelle's got $400,000. Billy Fox has about $160,000. John Carson's got $286,000 for the JP Courthouse Security Fund. Donna Burns has some for a time payment fee. I don't know what that is. Anyway, what I can tell you is that all of these funds that belong to all these other people have always been perfectly accounted for, as far as I could tell. The balances here have always said who is owed what. They have always known whose money was whose. If they came in, if the county would have come in and said, I'm going to take your money and not give it back to you, they would take your cash and say, I don't owe you $400,000 anymore, I owe you $200,000. And what would you do? Slap me or kick me? Did they take your money here? I don't know. You're supposed to have $400,000. If you came and asked me on October 1st, even though we were $3.4 million overdraft, to get your $400,000, the treasurer could have written you a check. The treasurer could have written you a check, could have written the commissioners a check for their $367,000 of lateral road fund money. They could have written Jack Pappas a check. They couldn't have written everybody a check on that same day. And actually nobody asked for a check. And the account filled back up pretty fast. And that's where it stands right now. The treasurer can tell you exactly who the money from this point right here below belongs to. And most of that is county money in one way or another. Some of it, last year it was 2.4 million, she moved some of that out, belongs to agency funds. But anyway, every bit of this, as far as we can tell, has been absolutely accounted for properly. Now, checks were written, and all the money jumbled up together, and some of it, like I said, it went down. It went down lower than anybody wishes. And it was lower right now. If it hadn't had that payday loan, this thing would be negative again right now, or very soon to it. Now, anyway, back to what Steve did. He says that the auditor said this money's not really restricted, and this money's not really restricted, and this money's not really restricted. That might be true, might not be entirely true. I don't know. I would think that the Commissioner's Court, I think he said that the $367,000, the auditor told Steve that the $367,000 for the lateral road fund could be used for anything. I don't think he was necessarily right about that yet, although I suspect that this board here could say, okay, we can use that $367,000 for payroll. But then it's gone. I would have a big hesitation toward using any of the restricted funds or the designated funds or the FEMA funds or anything right now. The way I look at the county right now is it's got a gas tank that's got a big hole in it. And fuel is pouring out. The money is pouring out. And putting more gas in a tank with a hole in it is not very smart. So, yes, there's some more cash in the bank account. If we put it in the tank, it's gone. Even if we can put your archive money, and you allow it, you were nice, you're helping save the county, it's not very smart. First thing we have to do is patch the hole. Okay? Now once we patch the hole, then we're not bleeding every month. In other words, we know this much revenue is coming in, and we're spending less because I think our committee would probably suggest doing that. Now, we don't sneak over and get them. And we sure don't get them while there's a hole in the gas tank. That's like the lifeboat, you're throwing stuff overboard, just trying to keep it afloat, and we don't want to do that. We want to fix the hole. So my purpose here is, John, we have climbed all over this cash in the last 2 weeks since we assigned ourselves to go look at cash, because this was important. I have tried to explain it, Steve didn't know I had done all this work, and I'll give him a copy of these work papers, because we are pretty satisfied with what happened in 2013, and I have, with a couple of little plugs from the auditor, we got our information. William Ty helped us tremendously, because when you ask the right questions precisely, the answer is pretty easy. So we have been doing that. We use the audit work papers. The treasurer, she left, she can tell you about every little, if you ask the right question, she's been exactly right. So we'll get that information. This is our update number 5. Now, update number 4 that we haven't quite got out yet is on the budgeting for next year. And so that's not the first priority. On this, we're going to get it in writing. That's the way our committee's producing everything, to show everybody exactly what has happened. I think that's our job for decision making. And so what this says is that the negative 3.4 million of operating cash was right. Luckily, there's $1 million CD, so it's not quite that bad. And there was another $100,000 of $20,000 accounts and stuff, but it's not that bad. Now, this thing ties to the audit and not to exactly the treasurer's numbers, because there's some audit adjustments that haven't been made yet, where possibly some restricted funds were transferred to the general fund. Now, the auditors, and I don't understand, we haven't researched that transaction perfectly yet. That is on my list. Regardless of whether it's thrown there or not, I am pretty confident that this board has not authorized that thing to be used for general operating purposes. So we have an opportunity in the future for some additional funds once we can get the hole in the gas tank patched. Let's see if I have anything else on my notes, and I will yield the floor. 2.286. That's a good number. That's what the cash in the bank is. It's not general fund cash. The $3,400,762 is the overdraft of the general fund cash undesignated in the bank account on that day. It's not as bad as it looks because there's a CD. It's not as bad as it looks because there's another $1.6 million of general fund designated cash. But it's not good. I mean, the cash is gone. And the goal for the county is going to be to get the water above this line and keep it there every month of the year. Let's see. When the treasurer opened up the new checking account of the restricted fund, she transferred over less than that. So she did not transfer over any general fund money. No money has been hidden or transferred or restricted, or she's doing anything that we have been able to find. All the money is there. All the money is in the bank right now. And the general fund cash that's available to y'all after your transactions today is going to be $400,000 or whatever the amount is on his schedule that he gave you. Plus you have $2.9 million at Techstar. And when that money is spent, you know, I don't know how you're going to get that. And I would suggest that you don't want that. You want the whole patched. Are there any questions? This is real complicated. And I had a lot more information than Steve did. We're working with the same numbers. And I had the benefit of working with William and got it bow tied. I can't explain why different reports throughout the year weren't the same. But I recognized all these numbers. And what he did here, this 667, I believe, is said, well, these funds have been restricted for 10 or 20 years, or 3 years, or 8 years, or some amount. And, you know, if we need them, we can get them. That would be y'all's job, as Commissioner's Court, to say, yes, we're going to take this one-time resource, you know, and spend it. And my suggestion is don't do that anytime soon. Let's get the hole patched. Let's get the taxpayers comfortable with what's going on. Because what I don't want is this county to be like Payne Stewart's airplane. And, you know, remember the golfer that was in the airplane and everybody died on board, and it just flew and flew until it was out of gas. This county, with leadership here, moving forward, plugging the hole, getting some revenue, controlling expenses, we can get these holes patched so it's not leaking, it's not bleeding anymore. And then we can work to build it up. But for all the department heads and everything else, the money is gone. It's not here. It wasn't here at the beginning of the year. It wasn't here at the beginning of last year. It's just been kind of covered up, and it gets really in a crisis the last month or two of the year. And the treasurer, you know, I mean, some folks may be mad at her, don't believe her. She got everybody a paycheck all last year without it being a hiccup. I didn't agree with the slide that Steve said that showed the graders coming out. What I believe, or here's what happened. That grader money is in the 2.286 number. It was in the bank. They sold them in October, in September. It was put in the bank. It was in the bank at year end. If Pat McCoy had not sold his grader, paychecks would have bounced. Or this money would have gone down so low that it would have gotten down into, you know, worse than, I'm not sure if it's proper, it would have gotten down to closer to, you know, well, I'm not an attorney, I'm not that kind of stuff. It's fixed now. There is money going forward. Let's patch the hole. How you look for, sir?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are we sure at this point how much water is in the glass?
Yes.
Where there's last year at this point, there were decisions made based on erroneous figures, obviously. The $3.4 million was not disclosed because the year-end numbers that they based their budget on was a positive fund balance. So I just want to make sure that we know at this point, we can work.
You know, I wasn't hearing you, but I don't know what was disclosed.
I wasn't here either, but I'm just saying.
What I believe is everybody said there's not any money that was paying attention to all the numbers. This is the June 30th, 2014 bank reconciliation. So I got it.
Are we sure all the water is in the restricted funds at this point?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. The treasurer keeps track of a subset of those. Some of the agency funds, the district court keeps track of.
See, we're totally reliant on the treasurer, I mean the auditor for the numbers. None of us are accountants.
And I have been, well, I have, so far, what I have seen and what the external auditors have seen, I mean, can you imagine how much audit time they used last year doing this audit?
Well,
Get this thing so close to zero. You know, I mean, I don't know if they had discussions with y'all. I mean, you know, the money was gone. I don't know what the discussions were. Anyway, right now, there is $5 million in the bank account. So that's what the bank says. Is that coming up? No, I'm making it smaller, sorry. There's $5 million in the bank at June 30th. When you take out outstanding checks and deposits, it's $4.3 million, and there's a $5 bank fee or something. That's there. There's the bank money. There's $100,000 in this part of the account, and $4,942,000 right there. You add those together, it's $5,042,000, which is that number. So all this is right. Here is their cash sheet. And on this day, which was June 3rd, this is the end of June, there were $756,000 available for operating. Another $20,000 in a special account, $17,000 in an account, $27,000 in an account. You know, almost $5 million less fees in the Techstars account. And the general fund has $5,000,007. That account's going to go down for the rest of the year. And when we're doing our budget for next year, and it's going to be, as Steve said, also, it's going to be very important to know how much cash, or in this case, how little cash is going to be there on October 1st. It's going to be positive, I believe.
Is this number before today's payables?
Yes. This is as of June 30. I did this one for the bank account. Now, the auditor
The one that I
and the
gave you-
treasurer can,
The one that I gave you in this.
Yeah, that was
as of Friday, after we put all the bills in.
their software, I like. It pulls everything out, it adds it up, it puts it in the right account. And the treasurer, I mean, you know, she's really particular. I mean, everything is balanced. I mean, that's all they do all day is balance. It would bore me to death. But they do it. I mean, when we look through her procedures, and, you know, and you'd be amazed at how much cash they keep up with from all these different sources, and they do a pretty good job of keeping it straight. So the accounting is good. Right now, there's not enough cash.
What is so good about this is the first time the Commissioners Court has had affirmed of them. That was on September 30th last year. We did indeed dip $2.9 million into restricted funds. As recently as May the 30th, we were told that we did not dip any into the restricted funds.
Restricted and designated.
Yes, restricted and designated. And so this is helpful. We needed that information close to a year ago. Secondly, the 2013 and 14 revenue is as restricted as any restricted fund. State law clearly states that it cannot be dispensed, distributed for any purpose other than in strict accordance with the final approved budget. And yet, that money was poured in to make up for at least $2.9 million worth of restricted and designated funds that were not in our budget. Number three, I don't remember anybody saying that road and bridge lateral fund can be used for anything. But if, on the other hand, our four commissioners have done projects in the past several years for which that fund has been sent to the county, then instead of that expense of fixing that issue coming out of the current budget, it comes out of the state fund that's given to us each year that's built up to this amount. Also, the road grader money, once the motor graders were sold, that money was just as reserved and restricted as any other money. And our two commissioners, that it looks like they're going to be way over budget because that money to buy those new motor graders was taken out of revenues this year rather than that $975,000 that was reserved for this very purpose. And so we have had some very enlightening things brought out to us today that'll be great to work forward on. I don't see that there's any action on this agenda item, and so I'd like for us to move to number 22,